If one of our favorite games gets successful, it's only natural to feel happy about it. After all, a commercial achievement ensures at least one follow-up in most cases, and the more people are interested, the more likely it is for a series to stay relevant. Normally, many IPs consist of trilogies before they end completely, be it due to lacking sales or a drop of quality. It's a remarkable performance to be an ongoing series for a decade, let alone going beyond that. And there must be a clear reason why certain franchises survived the test of time. Nintendo can proudly claim to own one of the most famous gaming icons under their belt, and it's rare to see people not being familiar with The Legend of Zelda, Super Mario or Pokemon. One of the rather unknown yet still notable series is the Kirby franchise. With over 30 titles, it's sometimes easy to forget how important the Pink Glutton is and always was for Nintendo. The main reason why he's not as popular as one of his colleagues has different roots and may vary depending on which person you ask, but one thing to say for sure is how Kirby never really invented or revolutionized anything. Going for the safe path, using ideas that function and expanding on them is a trademark of nearly every mainline Kirby game. And while this behavior may not let the franchise rise to a genre-defining luminary, it's also the reason why we still love the series. As a fan, you always know a Kirby game will be at least fine, and it's very rare to see a new title, be it a spin-off or mainline, take some serious missteps. This behavior may be one of the causes for the franchise to survive, but at the same breath, it would also undermine the quality of Kirby's history. Often, many IPs last long enough to become a trilogy or, in the case of Nintendo, never truly die but also don't remain. There's always the possibility for a Star Fox or Pikmin game, but calling them frequently appearing franchises would stretch the term quite a lot. What I basically try to say is how remarkable it is for Kirby to be one of the very few series in general, not only in the Nintendo cosmos, to keep its head up despite having a smaller dry period during the GameCube era. It was Return to Dreamland which brought back the series to past strength and modernized the traditional gameplay formula into an appropriate franchise to be proud of. Back in the day, this was a trend other IPs shared as well. Look at Rayman Origins or Donkey Kong Country Returns, but it was only Kirby who stuck to his potential and built upon this winning formula, with not only one successor but multiple ones. Fans like to refer to this period of time as the Return to Dreamland saga. Or maybe it's just me, I think I'm the only one who likes to call it that way, as most major follow-ups look and play very alike. You would think Kirby finally achieved to rise up to the heights of his much more successful genre mates, but again, it's only one half of the story. Despite the franchise having the decade of its life, it probably sounds insane to know that the original Kirby's Dreamland is still the most selling entry in the series, with over 5 million sold copies during its existence. Yet again, the reasons for that fact may vary from person to person, and the whole topic of how Kirby games are generally overlooked certainly deserves its own video, but one of the main factors is once more staying traditional. Donkey Kong Country Returns as well as Tropical Freeze enjoy such a respectful reputation due to how these games elevated the franchise into something that transcends the simplicity of the 2D platforming genre. Yes, they also modernized the classic Donkey Kong Country formula, but added so much substance and ambition into the whole mix that it's really hard to point at these games and be like, just another 2D platformer. Kirby, however, still suffers from this fate, and especially Star Allies could not hide the fact that there must be a point where even the most safe franchise needs to take some risks. Star Allies post-game time was quite an interesting one. After finishing the game with quite a number of free updates, it was actually pretty obvious from the get-go that the title would tackle things a little different. As it turned out, the final unlockable picture of Star Allies very much itself announced the end of an era for the franchise, and the long development time in combination with intriguing interviews from the developer's side should hype up the next mainline step. Unlike Star Allies, which released merely 2 years after Planet Robobot, it took roughly 5 years for the Forgotten Land to come out, which put the game already in a more optimistic situation. It appeared like the developers finally took their time with this title and wanted to make sure Kirby is still a force to reckon with. The results speak for themselves, as the Forgotten Land is right now the second most selling Kirby game just after a couple of months, and will probably dethrone the very original in its lifetime. However you feel about the actual quality of the game, it's undeniable how the Forgotten Land did go beyond from what we come to expect in terms of budget and ambition in a typical Kirby game. No one really disliked the adventure, and if there are people who are not fans, it's often just because of personal preference or minor things. Compare the game to something like Super Mario 3D World, an entry in the 3D Mario series that was developed by one of Nintendo's intern teams, most likely one of the most talented developers in the industry. It may be my personal bias, but looking at the graphics, level design, animations or music, it feels like the Forgotten Land was created by the very same team, because the overall quality and polish is just outstanding. The secret but simple key to why this specific Kirby game delivered on so many fronts is actually rather straightforward. It gave fans what they want while providing newcomers something they never knew they wanted to see. Since ages, followers are dreaming of an actual 3D title that is not a spin-off, weird experiment or some kind of other half-baked excuse. On top of that, most criticism of Star Allies were directly addressed, with the game having a moderately acceptable difficulty for the franchise, everything included without free updates, and remarkable level design. Unlike many other series, they struck the perfect balance between both camps, fans as well as newcomers, which leads us to the ideal now or never situation. All of this reminds us of Return to Dreamland's success, but the primary difference between both of these titles is how safe Return to Dreamland ultimately was. It may have been updated, but every enhancement was based on a foundation we have seen many times before. The Forgotten Land, on the other hand, makes use of a, for the franchise, unknown dimension and had to reimagine some traditional aspects in order to fit the new gameplay style. Of course, this resulted in some shortcomings like copy abilities not having the same expanded moveset like in 2D games. But you have to be aware that this is only the first step. From now on, who knows what kind of wacky ideas they will come up with, since the blueprint is already drawn, and how much they can improve on a concept that itself is proven to be worthy to explore. Now, you may ask yourself why this is so important for us or even Nintendo, since they are not the developers behind the Kirby titles. First and foremost, the bigger a franchise becomes, the more ambitious it wants to be. For the first time since ages, it feels like Kirby's playing with the big guys, and even though there may still be a way to come, nearly outselling the most successful title within months should be telling enough. Additionally, if Kirby becomes a bigger IP, HAL gets the opportunity to expand their workload as well, and maybe even work on 2 mainline games at the same time. We fans may not benefit directly from the success of the Forgotten Land, but the positive outcome influences the actions behind the scenes, which ultimately leads to more ambitious projects, resulting in us fans getting more great titles. This loop is often underestimated and sometimes even results in the opposite effect, where a series becomes lazy due to how it will be bought anyway. But right now, I don't have the feeling Kirby will be falling into this trap. The whole 30th anniversary so far is just an evidence of how much the creators care for the pink fluff ball, and whenever they crave for some money, they can easily just throw out another smaller eShop title. Another factor to account in is Nintendo itself, as they probably supervising projects without really interfering in the creative process. Obviously, they will notice the success and, most importantly of all, reception the game received, and this may be another small alarm for them. Metroid Dread is basically in the same boat, as this Metroid game delivered because it finally gave players what they want, without focusing exclusively on one dedicated fanbase. Experiments or weird concepts can be interesting in their own right, but it feels like Nintendo likes to forget that novel concepts can be combined with what made a franchise so grandiose in the first place. I'm more than certain that no one thought Forgotten Land didn't feel like a true Kirby Kirby title, when in fact it did go beyond that while carrying on the spirit of the franchise. I could sit here all day and list numerous cases where it feels like Nintendo's not in touch with what people want, but to show the other side of the coin as well, there are also a few examples of games striking that balance, like the aforementioned Metroid Dread, Mario Odyssey, Luigi's Mansion 3 or Mario Maker 2. The only, quote, downside to all of this is most likely that we will now have to wait always a little longer for a new mainline game, but as long as they keep the newly set quality standard, I guess this isn't a big pill to swallow.